Welcome to View from the Inside. I'm Tracy Overstreet, government reporter for the Grand Island Independent. Joining me today is Jeremy Collinson from the Central District Health Department. He is an environmental health specialist. Jeremy, we want to talk a little bit today about the food safety permit regulation changes that have been proposed. And first of all, why is the health department wanting to be or have a new permitting process for food handling permits?
Okay. Well, first off, good morning, Tracy. The reason the health department has approached the city of Grand Island to change the city code regarding this requirement is that this is just one step that we can do to help ensure that our food that is being served in Grand Island is safe. We know that there's a lot of good places out there, but if we can give them a little bit more education and a reason to get that education, we think that it'll help in preventing foodborne illness.
Okay, and so this is specific to, I think the term that's used is potentially hazardous food. That doesn't mean spicy food or anything. What is potentially hazardous food?
Potentially hazardous food is basically food that has the ability to grow bacteria.
Okay.
We're talking about meat products, anything like that. Food that has to be cooked properly to certain temperatures to be safe, or also food that has to be cooled properly to be safe.
Okay, so your milk products, yogurt, anything, cheeses, anything like that?
Yeah, anything like that.
Okay, so if it has to be heated to a certain extent, to a certain temperature, or cooled to a certain temperature, that has the potential of creating bacteria, so you want people to have special training.
Yes.
And you're talking about a food manager permit as well as a food handler permit. What's the difference between the two?
There's going to be two of them is what we're proposing. A food manager is going to be a person who's in charge of a facility. That training is going to consist of getting that certificate from an accredited source. There are quite a few sources throughout that are accredited for food manager training. That's going to be the one requirement, and then each establishment will be required just to have one person who has that managerial certification.
So one restaurant, one deli, if it's in a grocery store or something, that manager, they would only need one manager permit to oversee that.
Yes.
What about, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, just one person for the entire facility. So if you do have a large grocery store that has multiple areas within it, they would still only need one person.
Okay.
But if you have, a restaurant or something like that, they would be one person as well.
What about the food handler permit?
The food handler is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be as stringent of education. That's something that we are working on. We'll actually handle that class. We are working in conjunction with some other entities to help us provide that class. But what we want to do is just have a short, brief class that people can take and just go over the basics. We want them to know proper cooking temperatures, proper holding procedures, proper hand washing. This is just the basics. It's going to be quick. It's going to be fairly inexpensive. I think it'll really give those new employees an idea what they're getting into.
Have we seen problems in Grand Island with foodborne illness and food safety regulations with cooking temperatures and hand washing and such?
As far as foodborne illness, they're really hard to pinpoint. You may have one or two that happen at a time, but it's so hard to track them back because they happen hours and hours after the fact of when you have ate. So it's really hard to pinpoint where that come from, but we do know it happens. We have had some in the past, even in the state of Nebraska, where there has been big foodborne outbreaks, and eventually it has such an effect on that business that a lot of times they close, and we don't want to see that here in Grand Island. So I think if we just get the basics out there to people, proper hygiene and proper cooking methods, that we can stop a lot of foodborne illness from happening.
Okay, Jeremy, let's talk a little bit more about the food handler permit in that I think some questions have come up. First of all, there's a lot of turnover, and I think the health department has talked about this as one of the reasons to have the permit in the first place. There's a lot of turnover in the food industry, and even if it's a minimal cost for the training, $20, if you have constant turnover, even with maybe high school staff or part-time staff in that food industry, how is that able to be affordable to the business?
Well, we look at it the other way. If there is a lot of turnover, that's more the reason to get this education. That means you have a lot more new people coming into the industry, people who don't know what's going on, how to properly handle food. So with that turnover, that's one big kicker to have this. Now, if you were to have, the same employees year after year and they don't leave, you can get that education through them, and they know what's going on. But with the new people coming in, they don't know, and a lot of times they don't have the time at these facilities to provide that education. The education is supposed to come from the top down, and if the manager isn't properly trained, how can they train their employees on proper procedures?
Do you see this permit as being something that an employer would offer to the employees, or once an employee gets a permit, do they have the permit? And so maybe they got it at restaurant A, but they have this permit, they go to restaurant B, can they take it with them, or do they have to take the training again?
No, this permit, this certificate, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be good for that person. So that person, it'll be good for 2 years. That person can take it with them wherever they go.
So maybe if you have some high school kids that are looking for summer jobs, they could come and take the training at the health department and then offer themselves to the food industry as having this certification already.
Right.
Okay. What about volunteers that cook for like a hamburger night for various fundraisers for nonprofits and agencies? Are they affected by this?
They can be. And we know that going into this, we're going to have those issues that pop up, the what ifs. What we're looking to really get to the places that serve food on a continual basis for profit. People that are in the business serving food every day. That's who we really want to get to. We know there's going to be some nonprofits out there that set up a little booth on the weekend selling hot dogs, such as the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. We're not going to be picking on them. We understand that. At the health department, we have different types of food permits. One of them is a temporary food permit.
Okay.
If you have a temporary food permit, you're not going to be required to have any of this training. Now, you'll still get the permit through us to sell, food for the weekend or something, but you don't have to have the managerial training or the food handler training. And then also with volunteers. If there's a place that works on a lot of volunteers, we'll work with them, but we're still going to require them at least to have a manager who has the certificate, because somebody needs to be in charge. And so I think if they have a manager, and if it's on volunteer basis, we'll work with them. We'll make sure that they can still do their program.
Okay, so if the Vets Club, for example, has a hamburger hot dog feed fundraiser for a trip, their manager could oversee their volunteers who are running the grills?
Yes.
Okay.
On a case like that, yeah. But if they're serving food every day for lunch, we want those normal employees to be certified. We want them to go through the trainings. And in most cases, there are actual, what I would call, everyday employees at these facilities. And those are the people that we're looking at going through the class.
In some of the special events that come up in Grand Island, like an art in the park where food is served, or various functions like that, that is the temporary food permit that you're describing, and they're exempt from this?
Yeah, they will be. And a lot of that depends. We also have some vendors who are in the mobile food units that show up at some of those, what I would call them, temporary events, but they do it throughout the year. So they actually have a full-time mobile food permit to do that. And we would expect that those people would also have to have that education as well.
Okay, and then what is the timeline for this?
A lot of it depends when it gets passed. We want to give these people, these establishments, enough time to get everything in place. If it were to pass within the next month or so, we're probably looking at towards the end of 2015 having this be required. We have some processes at the health department that we have to do to get this in place, and then we want to make sure we give everybody enough time that they can get their employees, and then maybe come time at the end of the year, we'll set that hard date and we'll tell them, okay, when we're out doing the inspections, we'll be looking for those certificates then.
Okay, very good. So that's a discussion on some of the new food safety regulations that are being considered by the Grand Island City Council. Thanks for joining us on View from the Inside. I'm Tracy Overstreet.